So in this episode of the Leader Smith podcast, I have Jeff Carlucci back on the show. We're going to be talking about leading at home.
In a world of incompetent bosses, micromanagers, and petty tyrants, you are listening to The Leader Smith. Now, here is your host, Darren Gerdes.
Okay, so I am back, and with me is my good friend, Jeff Carlucci. Jeff and I taught at StoneBridge School in Chesapeake, Virginia I was there, he's been there 23 years. I was there from 1999 to 2005. And then I went off to Liberty University to teach for 6 years. Now I'm at Charleston Southern. But while I was there, I met my wife, and we started dating. We were engaged, we were married, all in that period while I was at StoneBridge. But before that and during that period, Jeff was like a role model, kind of a mentor of mine in what it means to lead, like what it looks like to, in a family, to be a good leader. And so I asked him to talk about this because I learned a ton from Jeff Carlucci. And so welcome back to the show, Jeff.
Thank you, Darren. It's a pleasure to be back. This is probably my favorite topic to talk about.
Yeah, and I can tell because we talked about it a great deal from 1999 to 2006. We spent a lot of time talking about that. And, more than talking about it was the way that you just let me put it like this. When we talk about like something like biblical worldview and somebody asks, well, how do you teach a biblical worldview? I leak it. I mean, it just comes out. It's not something that like I'm trying to teach this core component of something. It's just if you put in, it comes out. And same with you. If you put in, this is your inputs. It's just leaking out of you, not just in what you say, but in your example, in your prioritization of things, those kind of things. So I'm going to let you talk instead of me talk.
Okay. That'll be different. So, in thinking about leading at home, one of the things that I realized when I was thinking about talking with Darren was, as a leader, you actually have to have a place you're going. What is your vision? What is the purpose? Where are we going? Why are you leading in your family? Personally, I think leading in your family, and I am a Christian, and I do believe that God has established an order in the family, but whoever is leading, if you're a single mom, if you're a single dad, it doesn't matter. You have a role, the most important role I think you will ever achieve or ever accomplish. But where are you going? So for me and for my wife, Debbie, it was to reflect a godly marriage, to reflect Christ in all that we do, and to point to Jesus Christ in everything we do, whether we're leaking it, as you said, or whether we're actually speaking it. And then when we had children.
Well, stop before you get to that. Tell me about how your intentionality. So you said that this was intentional, but did you like sit down and say, so Debbie, we should be intentional about doing that? I mean, or how did that happen?
Wow. That's a great question. I would say we did not necessarily look at each other and say, here is our intentions and here's what we're going to accomplish. On the other hand, I think we did talk a little bit about the need to respect each other, and we did little things in our marriage. This is going to sound kind of corny, but I learned somewhere, and I think she did too, you treat your family like company and your company like family. That's so brilliant. We always were incredibly polite to each other. So and she'll tell you this at dinner. I guess almost every time we've had dinner in the 34 years we've been married, when she cooked, which is almost all the time, I would say thank you, because she did something for me. A lot of people think, well, you don't need to do that. That's kind of her role, isn't it? But it's not. I mean, it may be her role, but it's not as a servant.
So most of us are too tired of, being complimented that, we would not want to hear thank you again and again.
Yeah.
Nobody thinks that.
Yeah. So I think I'll come to another point in a minute. The other thing we did, and it sounds silly, we touched a lot. Now don't go weird in your thought process. She would walk by me going to the kitchen. I just hold up my hand. She'd touch my hand. And there was this sense of acknowledgement that you're there, and I appreciate that you're there. Not I'm in my show or I'm thinking, and it doesn't matter. You could be a cardboard cutout, and it wouldn't matter.
Mhm.
And I think that was something that was important. And then the third thing is, for God just I went to a men's retreat before we got married, and this minister, and I wish I could remember his name, was outstanding. And he basically put on the men the responsibility to be the person who heals the relationship. He basically said, if it's messed up, it's your fault, man. But I learned there, and this is really important, it doesn't matter if you're right. When
Mhm.
you have an argument, it matters that you restore the relationship, and then you'll figure out if you were right or wrong. And it really won't matter because it's all about the relationship, your love for her, your concern for her. And if you think about that scripturally, we're supposed to treat others as being better than ourselves. That doesn't mean strangers, that means your spouse. So I should think of Debbie as being better than me. So how can I show respect to her, which I think is the foundation for all of this? I mean, Christ is the foundation. But in almost every relationship, and this, if we were talking classroom, this would work in the classroom. You will never receive respect if you do not offer respect.
Mhm.
So show respect. I try to show respect to her in every way I can. Now, I'll tell you, I wasn't great at this early. And I remember there were some times way into our marriage that things began to click. It's like, oh, she's right and I'm not. How did that happen? And it was like, that didn't happen the first day or the first year because I was learning. And I think that's an important part of this also.
Yeah, you said something clicked. It took me a while, but something clicked for me when I realized, Nicole has different roles than I do, and she has different strengths than I do. And if I just would respect, like, that she is good at this and I'm not, a lot of things fall into place. And just doing that, it makes a world of difference. So, okay. Anyway, so as you were talking, I was thinking, I wonder how many people would not get divorced if they just heard the last 10 minutes. And I mean, just heard and applied the last 10 minutes. If they just did those few things, and you're just scratching the surface so far. You haven't
Yeah.
even got the kids yet, or any other aspect of leadership in the home. You're just talking about just the relationship. But it resonates with me because leadership is always relationship. The suffix ship means that you're in a relationship with citizenship, relation to the state, friendship, relation to each other, leadership, relation to the follower, right? So, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm getting up on my soapbox. You talk.
You know, w- when I think about my role as a husband, my role as a husband is to do everything I can to make sure my wife is secure.
Mhm.
I think one of the great dangers in marriages is when we allow jealousy to be there, and that jealousy is encouraged by some people thinking, "Oh, look how worthy I am. Other people are interested in me, therefore you should be interested in me." And that's the wrong thought process. We have made a commitment before God to be committed to each other. Commitment and love to me are almost the same thing. Love isn't ushy gushy when you first get married, and it's nice, it's huggy, kissy, ushy gushy, and that still happens, and that's not a bad thing, but it's a commitment. And so when I think you think I'm committed, I made a commitment before God, I made a commitment to my wife, and then I set. I hope this makes sense, Darren. If not, cut it out from here. In the classroom, one of the things I do is set parameters with classroom management. Here's what we're going to do. The school has rules. We have an honor code, and you're going to abide in here. And you don't, I'm going to bring you back in. And once we have this parameter set, we live really happily and we're relaxed. And I think in a marriage, not that I'm setting parameters, but that we set parameters. Now, you asked if there was something we looked at each other and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And yes, that happened. One of the things is we fight fairly. We don't call people names. And we never once ever in our 34 years have ever said, well, maybe we shouldn't be married. Maybe we should be divorced. Because for us, it was never an option.
Yeah.
So that was a parameter that we established. And as you live within inside of that, I think there's lots of freedom and joy. You just have to know, again, it's respect. Why would I not want to have respect for my wife? I just finished reading a book. One of the times we talked about reading. I just read D.L. Moody's book on sowing and reaping. You will reap what you sow.
Mm.
If I sow respect, I will reap respect. Now, if I'm sowing just to get, then that doesn't work. If I'm sowing out of a clear, godly purpose to show my wife respect that she is worthy of, and if it's in the classroom, the students, if it's anywhere, they will show respect. But I promise you, if you never show respect to your spouse, never respect their opinion, never respect their thought process or their time, you won't receive it. And think about that. I finally remembered what I wanted to say. It was at some point well into our marriage, because I am a confident teacher who is confident about what he knows and the way things ought to be. And it hit me at some point, wow, Debbie's point of view is just as valid as my point of view, even if it's not mine. And I asked God put us together. I need to listen to her because God is speaking through her to me, and I need to show her that value. And I think that's a really important part of relationships between husband and wife.
So the people that I know that have been married a long time that I respect about, their relationship with their spouse, say, listen to your spouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was another one of those, if I do that, that works better. It was another one of the revelation moments. But it's important. I mean, listen to your spouse. Tell me this, why do you think it is that some people are uber successful in business and, at the office, they're superstars, but they're train wrecks at home? What's going on there?
I would say it's a misunderstanding of priority and a misunderstanding of what will bring joy and happiness. If you work 80 hours a week, you work 70 hours a week, you're trying to accomplish something, and you've misplaced where the value is, and where when you get there, you're going to be content. You probably have seen Chariots of Fire, and a manager of an athlete, the athlete won the gold medal, and he's walking off almost in despair. And somebody said, "What's wrong? He just won the gold medal." And the guy said, "One day you'll achieve your goals, and then you'll understand." And I thought, the goals are the wrong goals.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with great success in business. But if you're sacrificing what I consider the gift of my role as a father or as a spouse to do those things, they have to be both and. It can't be either or. And if there is an either or, you have to choose your family, because the other doesn't matter. I think I was going to say, I think it's important that we understand that other goals outside of our family are trying to fill a gap, generally, that we're not having filled at home. And generally, now I have a role as a teacher, and I love what I get to do as a teacher, but I love being home, and I love, and what I do, I try to bring Debbie into what I'm doing. So the kids all know Mrs. Carlucci. She's there. She's at everything she can be. She tries to come to games. She's at parties that the kids are having at school or graduation parties. And I do that for a purpose. One of the purposes we talked about it before is modeling. Every time I see my wife on campus, I give her a kiss. There's a point. I'm trying to model, and I probably shouldn't say this if the kids are listening to this. I'm trying to model the way a husband and a wife ought to greet each other. And I try to show respect to her. So she's there. And now, go ahead.
Was that intentional, or was that just something that you did without thinking about it? Because I remember, you've always been modeling that as long as I knew you. Was that something that you thought about and thought, I'm going to be a model for these people, or did it just leak?
That's a great question. The answer is yes, but the first answer would be, it leaked. That is just who we are. That is just who I am. That's who she is. And then I recognized, oh, wow, we're always teaching. At school, I'm always teaching.
Yep.
So this is a great opportunity. Now, I like kissing my wife, so that's not a problem. But
That's good to know.
it is a leak. It is not fake. And I think the point that you're making is if you're faking the modeling, it's not really modeling because people see right through that. But if it's real, if it's leaking out and you understand your role as a something modeling biblical marriage, then it really works.
Okay, so shift gears for me. Instead of talking about just marriage, talk about family and parenthood.
I will, but you
Okay,
told me I could talk. Can I just finish the spouse one?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Please finish.
So I think one of the things, and I learned this from Dr. Dobson way back in the 80s, is Debbie and I have a role. I'm doing something outside of the home. She has a business that she developed and runs. If we aren't careful, we could go in two separate directions. And then when the kids were gone, all of a sudden we haven't kept our relationship
Uh-huh.
the way it ought to be. In our home, God was first, Debbie was second, and the kids were after that. It wasn't God then family because the
Yeah.
kids were leaving. And it was important for us to grow together. And I think that's important for families. All right. So let's go to the kids.
I got to tell you
Um,
a story though with that because you said Debbie before the kids, right? And so I do the same thing. Like my kids will try to ask me things to, well, who do you love more, mommy or me? Sorry, mommy came first.
yeah.
It's not that I don't love you, but mommy came first, and I love you dearly with all my heart. But mommy comes first, and I am intentional about trying to convey that message because I want you to understand I love your mother. If I love your mother, there's security there. That's a very different place to be than, no, everybody's equal. No, no, you're not. I mean, you kids
Yeah.
are equal. I love you kids equally. I don't play favorites there, but there's definitely a hierarchy where Nicole comes before you do. So,
Absolutely. And you mentioned security, and I think that's something that's underappreciated. Security in your family, security in relationships is a big part of having a successful family and marriage. So let's talk about the kids a little bit. We talked earlier about vision and purpose. So it is the purpose for Debbie and I as Christian parents, for our children. And it was very simple to pass the baton of Jesus Christ, that as they follow after Christ for us, that was it. You may remember this song. John Elefante used to be the lead singer or a singer for Kansas. He's a believer, and he has a song called "Pass the Flame," and it just hit me again back in the '80s. Pass the flame. It won't matter
mhm,
whatever else we accomplish
yeah.
if we fail to do that. So for us, the purpose is to point in the Jesus Christ in everything that we did.
Yeah, and so
Um,
there are decisions that you make as a consequence of that. And I want to give you some examples. There was a parent that I remember at StoneBridge that turned down a promotion because that would have taken them away from time with the family. Like this would have been a big promotion, and I'm not going to say who it
yeah,
was, but they turned this down. I was like, that is my hero.
yeah,
I mean, not because I don't want to, do all that I can do, but I've done something not turned down a promotion, but I actually went back to teaching partly because I was thinking, if I stay in this administration role, they'll if I leave that, they'll find somebody else to do that thing, and they'll go on without a beat. But my kids need me. I have six of them, and there's only one person that can be their dad,
right.
and there can be plenty of people that can do that other role. So I don't need it. I mean, it's not like my
Yeah,
ego comes from that role. I mean, I
right.
know enough to know that that's a fool's errand. That's silly. But I need to be there for my kids. So yeah, that's really important. And you'll make decisions if you start thinking what you were just saying.
Yeah, because nobody, like you said, nobody else can do that role as dad. As good as you are at your job, somebody else could do that job too. And so that's an important understanding. Um, yeah, one of the decisions we make, you taught me. So you've talked about things I've taught you. You taught me the concept of opportunity cost.
Hmm.
What opportunity am I missing if I take another opportunity?
Hmm.
And I think it has all to do with what you just said. Um, when he was born, and he would cry at night. And I got up way back then, and 2 in the morning, I'd be holding him, watching Sports Center, and that was all right. And not thinking, dude, go to sleep. I was thinking, I won't be able to do this. And I got to tell you, I'm not really sure how I knew that back then, but I did. And it's like, I won't be able to do this later. Or my daughter, who would climb, daddy, daddy, daddy's home. And they'd take me and sit down, and she'd climb in my lap and kiss me. I mean, she's 26 now and married. She doesn't run home and go, daddy, daddy, when I come home. So there are opportunity costs. Now, that works the other way. If I choose to be at home, my work or my opportunities for advancement at a job, like you said, may suffer. But again, where's the value? What's my call? What am I supposed to do? So I think, getting back to kids, clear expectations of what the role is, or the goal is for the family. Uh, Secondly, I think it's the respect thing. When I made mistakes, even though I hated it, I would say, Andrew, Allie, I was wrong. I was totally wrong. Please forgive me, because I was trying. Again, you're modeling, but it's just the right thing to do. And of course, and you may have had that because you
Yeah,
may have made a mistake.
yeah, I was thinking, even if you were perfect, you ought to throw in a few mistakes just so you could do that.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, not that I'm perfect. I'm nowhere near it, but it's shocking. It's quite a teaching opportunity or teaching moment when you do that and you humble yourself and model how to humble yourself. And I've made plenty of mistakes, believe me. No, there's no
yeah.
question about it. But when you do that, that's really a shocking teaching leadership moment.
A couple of other thoughts about raising children. I think one of the keys to understand is God gave your children to you,
Mhm.
and God gave your brother and sister's children to them, or your best friend's children to them. And if they make a different decision than you, and you're doing the decision that God has called you to do, you're not wrong and they're not wrong, because God has given them to you for a purpose. So you do what God's leading you to do. And I think it takes a lot of stress and pressure off to try to keep up. And I think that's really important. Um, Also, I think it's important to follow. We talked in the past, we talked about being a good follower in order to be a good leader. And I follow Christ, and I think I should do that openly. Now, Debbie was great at this. We did that very openly, but I have to make sure I'm following Christ. I have a boss at school. I have to make sure that I'm respectfully following my boss. We have our pastors. I have to show respect. And I think important, I have to show respect to my parents and
Mm.
to my wife's parents if I want my kids to show
Yep.
respect to me, because that is the relationship. I mean, that is the modeling of the relationship. We talked about soccer in the past. I talked to parents before the season. Please don't yell at the referees and call them names and get angry, because they are the designated authority on that pitch. And what you're teaching your children when you do that is, if you don't like what the designated authority is doing, go ahead and have a fit and yell and scream. But that's not okay. If I want my daughter to marry a godly, respectful man, I have to be godly and respectful husband to my wife.
Mhm.
If I want my son to marry a godly, respectful woman, I my wife needs to be a godly, respectful wife. I mean, that's just those kinds of things. Um, so I think that one of the greatest things, or one of the greatest things we'll do, is raise our children.
Yep.
Time goes by quickly. When Andrew went away to college, it was brutal. We drove him away 3 hours, dropped him off, and cried the entire 3 hours on the way home. And I remember thinking then, I'll never do something as valuable as that and as important as that. I knew Allie was still there, and I knew that I wasn't saying her role wasn't as important as my role with Andrew. But what I've come to realize, and probably that's the case, but there are seasons of life, and I'm 60. And there are a lot of things God has now given me to do that are really valuable to me at this point of life.
Yeah.
So for the things that you don't get to do, for those people who are thinking, yes, but I'm missing out on this, this, and that, God has a call. And when you follow him and do what he wants you to do, raise your children. be respectful to your wife, do the things you ought to do. He will then bring later on other things for you to do. Um, Walk in humility. I think you and I have talked off greatest character trait of a leader. And if you walk in humility, realizing it's not Rick Warren has it right, it's not all about you, and make sure that you are adding value to other people, doing what God's called you to do. And if you never get noticed, but you have helped your children to follow after Christ and your spouse to be loved and respected, you've done a good job.
Yeah. So, as you were talking, it reminded me of when Gracie was first born. I had already left Stonebridge. I was at Liberty, and I was talking to a colleague. His name was George Young. And, my first child was just born, and he stops into my office to say, congratulations. And he said, and so he congratulates me, and then he spends the next 15 minutes going down memory lane about his own kids who are now out of the house. And I'm like, are you here to congratulate me, or are you talking about? But then he says this. He says, enjoy every moment. It goes by so fast, just like what you were just talking about. And that always stuck with me. So that even when you don't enjoy every moment, you really don't. I mean, sometimes like your kids scream and give you a migraine, or I mean, it's just, you don't enjoy every moment. But thinking in terms of this time is going by and I'm not going to get it back. This is why, like one of the things that I do is I make sure my kids get hugs. I mean, I'm going to go for the low hanging fruit. You're not going to have a hug deficit. Okay. And so that's just part of thinking that way. And okay, so we have to wrap up at any rate.
One final point.
I'm going to give you the last word after the quotation for contemplation.
Sounds good.
So the quotation for contemplation comes from, believe it or not, the source that I found with this, I found the quote by itself, but then I also found it with Frank Lautenberg, the senator from New Jersey.
Uh-huh.
Now, I think this might have been a commencement address, so it might come from somewhere else, but the quotation from contemplation is this: your accomplishments in business will not be on your tombstone, but your family will.
Yeah.
What a great quote.
That's a
your
great
family will
quote.
be there, but your accomplishments won't. So think in terms of what's important. Okay, last word, Jeff Carlucci.
We talked about the time goes by and you won't have them at home anymore. But I'm here to tell you, Andrew's been married 5 years. He'll be 31. Allie's 26 and is married. The relationships continue, and they continue, and it's really positive. So what you're doing now is laying groundwork for later. You don't want to, at 15, 16, 17, 18, burn bridges so badly that you don't have a relationship with your adult kids, because I'm going to tell you, you want that.
Mm-hmm. Hey, man, thanks for coming in. Thanks for talking about this. This is everything that we talk about on the podcast is about leadership, and this is a under discussed, incredibly valuable but under discussed topic when you're talking about leadership at home. And thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. It's been my pleasure.
All right. So if that was helpful, I hope that was helpful to people that were listening to this, and I hope this helps you become the kind of leader that you would want to follow.